Welcome, travelers, to this explainer. Pull up a seat by the dying embers of our campfire, because today we're diving into a terrifying mythic warning about a fallen kingdom. We're looking at a dark, cautionary fable known to fantasy readers as the Prophecy of the Fourfold Verdict. It's this haunting, Gothic text that details exactly how an old world collapses into what's called the Age of the New Gods of Negation. It's honestly an incredible piece of mythology, and as we go through it, we're going to visually map out how a kingdom decays from perfect order into just absolute chaos. So, in the wake of the permanent night, a new god shall arise to claim the ruins. Let's jump right into this chilling prophecy. It all kicks off in the wake of the permanent night. This is that moment when the king's light has completely vanished and the throne stands famously vacant. Now, when a massive power vacuum like that opens up, the ruins don't just sit empty, right? Something always fills the void. And according to the text, 4 distinct entities, these new gods, emerge from the shadows to claim the wreckage. Our descent into the dark begins with Act 1, the coronation of the Iron Sentry. The very first entity to step out of the shadows is the Pale Inquisitor, also known as the Knight of Memory. Now, as the state's first lawgiver in this new dark age, you'd think you bring a new dawn. But no. Instead, he enforces a twisted doctrine of absolute stasis called necrotic morality. Think of it as a dead, decaying type of law. It actively punishes the collective soul of the kingdom for all its past failures and its secret shame. It looks backward instead of forward, basically weaponizing the memory of the kingdom's fall to keep everyone completely paralyzed with guilt. The imagery in the text here is just incredibly stark and shadow-heavy. Stand perfectly still upon the iron bridge. Just picture this heavy, rusted, immovable horror. The Inquisitor commands the people to freeze upon that rusted iron bridge. And that rusted armor, it perfectly represents how the state has just stopped. It's frozen, locked in time by the sheer crushing weight of its own past mistakes. And this is the terrifying reality of the Pale Inquisitor's reign. The state becomes this paralyzed fortress of self-punishment. Literally every single citizen is suddenly a defendant in an endless trial. There is no innocence anymore, only degrees of guilt. And why? Well, the Inquisitor knows the throne is empty, and his main goal is to murder any hope that seeks to fill it. I mean, if the people are constantly having to defend themselves, they cannot rise up. But the prophecy certainly doesn't end there. As the blood of memory cools, we transition into Act 2, the deification of the glass ledger. This phase marks a really horrifying shift into cold, stark light. A second god is enthroned, the Last Thinker, or the Knight of Reason. Under his rule, the halls of governance are turned into a silent glass library. You are no longer a living citizen who breathes and feels. Nope, you are merely a ledger entry, filed away in an inescapable bureaucratic archive of extinction. Turns out, hell isn't actually fire and brimstone, it's just infinite paperwork and shattered glass. It's a complete stripping away of all human warmth. To this god of reason, analyzing the wreckage of Camelot isn't about, actually finding solutions. Instead, the state's intellect becomes completely paralyzed by its own cold logic. Human thought is no longer seen as something protective. It's viewed as a dangerous contagion that has to be contained to ensure absolute silence. Rationality is twisted so far that it destroys the very mind it was meant to serve. All is empty, and the only truth is data. Under the deification of the ledger, this chilling mantra becomes the absolute, unquestionable law of the land. When everything is reduced to numbers and shattered glass, empathy just dies. And that's the ultimate danger of the Knight of Reason. He creates a kingdom perfectly ordered, but entirely devoid of life.
Because the sterile order of the glass library obviously cannot last, things escalate. We arrive at Act 3, the Gospel of the Gilded Fang.
From the deep shadows of the state's despair emerges a third entity, the Tarantula Preacher, the Knight of Will. Now we're moving away from cold rationality into something intensely primal and vicious. This god of revenge weaves a massive web of hidden malice. He discards the old heraldry of honor entirely, preaching what he calls the uncanny law of the predator, urging the kingdom to embrace its most atavistic, base instincts. And honestly, the most terrifying part? He masks this deep, predatory hunger behind a gospel of equality, making sure everyone is equally caught in his web. Just think about the potent, heartbreaking symbolism here. The golden promise of the Old Kingdom, the legendary Round Table, a massive symbol of unity and noble equality, is utterly corrupted. The Tarantula Preacher reimagines it as a gilded, inescapable trap. It's now just a circle for prey to gather, so the predators sitting right at the center can feed.
Who survives when the Round Table becomes a hunting ground? You really have to ask yourself as you traverse the ruins of this fable, what happens when the noble will to power is revealed to be nothing but a venomous will to undo? When the Round Table is just a hunting ground, the only true justice left is the sting of the spider. The kingdom is literally tearing itself apart from the inside.
And that brings us to the terrifying climax of the prophecy, Act 4, the manifestation of the masked judge. So when the cynical knowledge of memory, reason, and will has entirely saturated the earth, the ultimate horror physically manifests. The prophecy describes this haunting sequence. First, a crow, representing the zeitgeist or the wandering spirit of the time, hovers over the wreckage, literally feeding on the despair created by those first three gods. Then, as this negative psychic energy gathers and coalesces, that sheer, suffocating despair actually takes on living, breathing, physical flesh. The violet knight appears, raising a gavel shimmering with bruised light. Out of the darkness, this masked judge arrives. Picture the blinding, violent contrast of this bruised violet light piercing through the deep shadows and rusted armor of the previous eras. It perfectly represents the ultimate physical verdict that is just about to strike the earth.
So, the absolutely crucial point is what happens the exact second that Violet Gavel falls. We enter a phase called the agonizing evolution. Through these distinct epics of suffering, first, second, third, and final, the gavel strike doesn't just destroy, it compresses. The three gods of the state, the crushing guilt of memory, the cold, shattered data of reason, and the predatory hunger of will, are violently crushed together into a single terrifying entity. The state itself is being fundamentally and violently rewritten through this agonizing pressure. And here is the dark result of that pressure. The state undergoes a total regression, morphing into this grotesque figure called the man-beast. It is a horrifying synthesis of intellectual despair and feral survival. All that paralyzed intellect of the glass library and all the heavy guilt of the iron bridge are just shoved straight into the primal, predatory body of the tarantula. Perfect order has completely dissolved into absolute, monstrous chaos. The higher men are executed. A savage, new purpose crawls from the ruins of dark Camelot. This is the true meaning of the fourfold verdict. The absolute destruction of the old order. The text tells us that the higher men are executed, meaning everything noble, thoughtful, or aspiring is entirely wiped out to make way for this feral reality. A savage new purpose crawls out of the dark ruins, leaving the age of heroes dead forever. It's an incredibly dark, powerful myth that uses these symbolic relics, the iron bridge, the glass ledger, the gilded fang, and that bruised violet gavel, to warn us about the fragility of our own structures. So I'll leave you with this final, vital question to ponder long after our campfire fades. As you wander through the systems, laws, and ruins of your own world, which of these dark gods is secretly writing your verdict? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep your eyes open in the dark.